welcome to, I used to count what number meetup it was now. As soon as we've kind of been going 18 months, I stopped doing that. But probably about our 19th or 20th session, I'd say, of the Agile Leadership and Business Agility Meetup. So to those who are returning to us, welcome back. And to the new folk, it's great to have you. The sort of the meetup is, we try to be a little bit different in that we focus on business agility rather than your more traditional Scrum stuff and Agile stuff. And we try and go a little bit broader, and that's absolutely what we're doing today. So thank you for being here. I'm going to keep clicking on people as they arrive, because I'm sure people will continue to arrive over the next few minutes or so. So leave that one with me. We'd love to see you. By the way, you have if you have cameras and you are in a fit state, please turn them on, because it's a much more interesting experience. I get that not everyone's in the position, but if you could, that would be wonderful, because we like to see faces after all. All right, I'm going to get out of your way now, because no one's here as ever to see me. We are here to see our speaker today, who. Well, where do I even start? Hello, and thank you, and I really appreciate you joining us. This is a really important aspect to focus on HR side of things, and one that gets missed so often. So we're delighted to have you here. I have your book teed up to read as my very next one, so apologies, I've not yet read it. Agile HR. I'm sure it's wonderful. I've heard very good things about it, but I haven't got to it myself. But it's an incredibly important topic, and I'm glad you wrote it. And I'm glad I get to read it, so thank you for that. Speaking about people and such things, we have the wonderful Natal Dank. I'm going to hand over to you right now. Over to you.
Cheers. Thank you, Karim. Very lovely to meet you all. And I'm in, well, it's actually sunny Scotland today, so quite rare. Lovely. I'm an Aussie that lives in Scotland, and lovely to see all of you wherever you're from tonight. I actually can see a few names that I know, so big shout out to you. And for everyone I'm new to meet tonight, that's wonderful. So I'm going to pop some slides up, and the way we're going to run this, I'm going to base it on a fairly kind of, well, it's interactive by using chat, and then we can see, and I'll kind of then feed off the information you put into chat, the questions you ask. Of course, if anyone wants to particularly contribute at any stage, not a problem. I'd love that. But that's how we're going to kind of do the discussion tonight. And of course, to get us into the flow, I'd love to know, where are you logging in from tonight or today, depending on where you are, and of course, what the weather's like. And for once, I can say it's sunny where I am, which is very rare. Toronto, cool. Is it really hot still in Toronto, or? Okay, Norway, super humid, yeah. Abu Dhabi, 48 degrees. Okay, you've taken it. That's definitely, that's hot. Cardiff has sun and rain. Lovely, lovely. Sunny in Nigeria, fabulous. Northamptonshire, sunny. We're just north of Cambridge, sunny, but a bit of cloud. Guildford is cloudy. Essex is sunny. Cool. And South London, partly sunny. Cool. Budapest, burning hot. Cool. Excellent. So we've got a really nice mix. And essentially, these days, because you can never travel anywhere, I allow just live vicariously through everyone that dials into Zoom sessions like this. So great to meet you. So what we're going to talk about today is what I what I like to say is the new HR. So how do we start building people practices for more and more what we're seeing as the new working paradigm? And actually, there's an amazing article I've just been reading about how, you know, all these discussions at the moment around hybrid working, do we go back to the office, do we not, what's the mix, is actually maybe even missing the point, in that we are in a true transformative stage of the workplace. And up until now, we've still been in this sort of old paradigm of kind of for want of a better word, the kind of waterfall style corporation. So that, you know, the hierarchy, the pyramid, the kind of set the goals and the strategy and then cascade down and constantly align up and down the ladder. And as we all know, that's been dead for a while. It's not responsive, it's not customer centric, it's not innovative. And so many organizations before the pandemic were looking, how do you become, in many ways, more agile? But of course, that looks and feels quite different depending on your organizational setting. But how do you be more customer centric? How do you be more collaborative? How do you work in the network rather than that hierarchy? And more that was leading organizations to embrace agile ways of working. As you all know, I'm sure your people practices, or HR, can reflect a lot of those old ways of working, and also start to block if you're wanting to move into this new kind of paradigm of how we're going to build the workplace. And what's really interesting is the pandemic has just, it's just accelerated all of this. And what's also been so fascinating is that, it's sort of proven that if you put a bunch of people together with some tech, and you help and you give them, a few goals to go and achieve, they'll go and get the work done and they can create great work. And more we're seeing people coming together in true, product-based teams or skills-based teams and getting things done without those kind of instructions from above. So I just think it's a really amazing time at the moment around where the workplace goes from here. So that's what we're going to look at today. How could you take more of an agile approach to designing the people practices that enables this new way of working? So a big theme is to enable business agility, HR, people, culture, organizational change. So everything that sort of sits in that space. We, or the profession, needs to embrace an agile mindset as well. And so it's no use following a more traditional waterfall approach to build the new solutions. You need to be agile in how you do that. Cool. So I'm Natal, and if you don't know me, please connect on LinkedIn. I love to have a chat, and I'm very bad at being on Twitter, but you can get me there as well. I usually just forward things that I like, or what is it? Retweet. Yeah. But please connect up with me. And so PXO Culture is all about building people experience and operations for the modern marketplace. And we do lots of free meetups. We also do a lot of paid events, but specifically I and some of the people I work with, we work very directly with HR teams. So HR teams, HR leaders, both in how do they start to evolve their own ways of working, but also start to build people solutions. So we cover everything from, performance and reward through to one of the projects I'm in at the moment is getting a team of 100 HR people to actually embrace this whole new kind of agile cadence. So it's quite interesting kind of work. And if anyone's keen, we've got one of our special events coming up next week, actually, where we do a big immersive design sprint, and that's on a career development. So how could you prototype and test a solution in career development within 3 hours? So that's the aim of that one. Cool. So as I said, we're going to kind of the rest of the session, I'm going to ask questions like this on the screen, and we're going to actually quite soon, I'm going to get you to think of a business challenge that you have around HR or people practices. And then we're going to look at how could you start to approach it with a more of an agile lens and mindset. Now, some of the techniques are not necessarily going to be new to you, particularly if you already work with a lot of agile tools and methods, but perhaps applying it to a HR situation, and also thinking about how would you get your HR team to start to embrace this and actually work with you in this way. That's where I'd like to go with it, because this is key for how to evolve people practices for business agility. So first of all, would love to understand, what do you do and what's your interest in Agile HR? So for example, are you an Agile coach and you want to partner more with HR? Perhaps you coach HR teams, maybe the other way around. So please let me know a little bit more about who you are and what you do. Okay, so we have a HR VP and moving from a traditional HR structure into an agile structure. Fantastic, lovely to meet you. Good luck with that. So we have an agile coach, coaching tech HR. Okay, cool. And that's a really nice, I find that's one of the first areas where there's a really nice complementary crossover of agile tech mindset and HR. And we have Chris, agile coach, on the back of Karim's CAL course, which I'll have to work out the acronym. I think the middle one is A, stands for agile. Looking to work with our HR to move away from things like annual objectives. Yes, yes. Cool. Certified agile leadership. Fantastic. With the P. Great. So we have support teams in dealing with abstract and visionary transformation and target vision type of dictated changes in my role as an enterprise agile coach. Pretty cool, Maru. We've got a CTO product lead wanting to bring agile to the rest of the organization. Awesome. We have project manager, scrum master for cloud program. And we've got a HR business partner. Hello. Helping the business transform. Fabulous. And we've got agile coach trying to work with HR, also off Karim's CAL, which I now know what that means. Excellent. Cool. So we've got a really nice mix of people. So that's fantastic. And I think for me, this also demonstrates that if we really want to achieve any kind of organization agility, we're all in it together. So, and, you know, from HR to account to finance, through to marketing, through to tech or other functions, this is what it's all about. So great to see. So we always, I always talk with HR teams about what does agile mean for the world of people, culture, and organizational change. And it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's kind of using words that sort of resonate more with the HR profession. So we of course talk about, okay, customer sits at the heart of everything we do, and we're aiming to incrementally deliver value to that customer. Now, the word incremental is quite different for HR. Traditionally, it has been a bit more of the big bang, one size fits all, kind of more waterfall style approach to building solutions and rolling that out across the business. So that incremental development is one of the key first changes that you start to see. Also, this thing of value. So how does HR understand the value that they're delivering? How could they verify that early on and then start to, of course, deliver that early and often? And that's also interesting. How do you get tangible in things like building a hybrid workplace or enriching the well-being of your employees, building leaders of the future for roles you don't know about yet? Some of these problems, they're complex, so Agile suits them, but they also can be quite vague. And so it's about how do you really start to break it down and be quite specific with the value you're going after? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And then, of course, we talk about how by putting your customer in the heart of what you do, it becomes very human-centric because you're trying to build solutions that's for the user, which is the employees of that organization. Then also the multi-skilled aspect's quite interesting. So to get the job done, you need all the skills in the team, and that's actually quite different for HR again, because we have often been these sort of single topic owners up until now. So I did learning and development, and someone next to me would do recruitment. Someone else would do culture change. Another person would do engagement. But actually all the topics and projects that we're working on all related to each other, and would always have to get everyone involved in the projects to try and take them forward. So this is actually being a more clear, okay, what's the main opportunity or problem to solve for the business? Why don't we go after that with a multi-skilled team, actually deliver value and then move on to the next one, rather than constantly trying to move just pieces forward and not really getting anywhere. So a lot of the same issues that you see in other business teams are impacting HR, And this is why Agile itself can be a great solution or benefit to HR in how they work, not just in how they actually build products and services. So another thing we do a lot is spend time kind of just thinking about how the manifesto translates into the world of HR. And because it can feel a little bit techie, the words that are used when people first read it. Though the first one for me is just like very obviously what HR should all be about, people over process. So interactions and individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And for anyone that is in HR on this call tonight, the amount of times you have probably said something like, oh, it's not about the tool, it's about the conversation. So things like performance management have often been directed and become all about the tool and the filling the form and filling the box, where actually it should be about the conversation and the feedback. And so this is a big challenge in the world of HR. Getting something working, so having people experiences overriding the policy first. And I'm sure you can all appreciate this. How do we build, policy should be about making real-time decisions, and it's about the experience of work. So how do we really build that, get that right? And policy supports that. Perhaps you don't even need everything written down. Then you got customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So this idea of building value together. So how do we co-create? And this is things like using design thinking, proper actually user testing before you release, understanding that it's okay to experiment in how you build solutions in the people space just as much as the product space, because then you know you're actually going to get it right. And then, of course, responding to change over following a plan. And I think if there's one good thing out of the pandemic is that it's helped HR understand that you can't plan for everything and you can't write policy for everything. And you've just got to help your people start, get up, running, working together, collaborating together. And so it's helped HR understand more that this agile way of working. Okay, so a big theme is also this co-creation. So for me, this was what kind of got me into agile for HR. So one of the stories I always talk about is I was working for a big bank, and we were using a 25-box matrix to assess talent. So not just 9 boxes, we went all the way 25. And of course, no one wanted to use any half of the boxes. No one wanted to actually be transparent about these conversations. So there was this huge process that existed around assessing talent that didn't really seem to support the outcomes that it was supposed to be there for. And I kind of left that role a little bit I want to get back to what HR is about. It was about building great places to work. And I went and was quite fortunate, worked at an organization that was very agile from the word go. They were now quite successful, but they kind of had started in a very agile way. And I was asked to help them build a new performance and reward approach for agile teams. And I did what an agile consultant does. I went and interviewed some people. I went and looked at some engagement survey results, looked at what I considered best practice from cool companies like Google. And then I presented what I thought they should do. And the sponsor quite rightly said, well, how do you know that's going to work? And I went, oh, well, your people have said that they want this, and I was really cutting edge. I was going to take away ratings, and I was going to, we could do collective reward and introduce all this peer feedback, which of course, now I look at it, was so much change all in one go. And he said, well, in my line of work, we test things, we get data, and then we start to make decisions based on that data. So you need to do the same. So I kind of stumbled into this world of creating smaller based experiments of how do you test solutions in HR. And what was really interesting is we looked at things like, okay, how do you do feedback? What's the impact of ratings? And one team I gave them some tech, so an app that sat on their phone to help them give feedback to each other. And I thought, oh, they'll love it. They hated it. But because it was a small based experiment, I could kind of stop it there. And it also was interesting. They said, oh, we don't need an app to give feedback. We need more of a psychological safe space. You know, we less about the money, less about the ratings, more about the feedback, these kind of things. So it was so insightful. And so we ended up making quite a lot of big changes to how reward was structured and how we did feedback. But by the time we were doing those changes, everyone was in it together. And I left that project and realized, this is how you can co-create. So it's not about implementing change onto people and then trying to managing it through it. It's actually trying to build it directly with them. And yes, there'll always still be arguments and discussions. It's dealing with preferences. It's dealing with, you know, different ways of seeing the world. But ultimately, you can get a solution that does meet all people's needs by really kind of building it with them. And so that's the theme that we're looking at. Okay, so what do we got? We got okay, 5 to the hour. Okay, so let's go into the next section where I'm going to ask you to think about a business challenge in the people area of your organization. And then I'm going to ask you some questions to start thinking about it how would you approach it in a more agile way. So this will be useful depending on, you know, if you are in HR, then this will be useful for you to think about how would you go and do this. If you're in Agile, it'd be useful to think about how do you coach a team in going in this direction. And it's just interesting to think about how do you approach these things in a new way. If you're already doing some of this stuff, would love to hear some of your examples as well. Okay, so we're going to think about a HR or a people practice that needs to be improved in your organization. So something that you're either working on now or you would like to work on. So it could be something around the way you do performance. It could be career development. It could be more team-based. So what's a challenge that you're facing at the moment? I'm, from this point, going to give you silent brainstorm time and then ask you to put things into chat. And then if you have any questions, just put them into chat at any time and I'll pick them up. Cool. Are we good with that? Are you ready to go? Yeah, cool. All right. So what's your business challenge? What would you like to focus on in this session? And I'd love to hear a few examples if you're willing to share in chat. Cool. Rewards and performance management. Okay, cool. Improving feedback culture. Excellent. Setting up a HR department. Okay, cool. That's a good one. Okay, and we've got organizational redesign, challenges deciding on minimal viable product and what experiments you would design to implement this incrementally. Yeah, organizational redesign is a really interesting one. Okay, doing performance management in an agile structure where there is no hierarchy. Yep, cool. Annual appraisals, goals, lots of performance topics. And then we've got unrealistic and too far-fetched. What I meant by visionary, I was being sarcastic. Okay, visions enforced by HR on product teams. And on how they should behave and think. Excellent. So Maru, is this like a competency framework or these kind of things? Is that the kind of language?
It's a systemic issue in how enterprises see how these individual human beings, I insist on a word, part of the organization, what the role is and what HR, how HR sees them. And I still think—
So the view of rather than being resources, we're actually humans. Is that what you mean?
Not really. I think we're beyond that, at least in the discourse, we're really beyond that. What I mean is what HR wants to see in many cases I've worked on in terms of Agile is just enforcing some external vision, and I insist on
Right.
vision
Okay.
because it comes from
Yep.
strategy consulting slides on people who are actually supposed to become that, like they were some pasta that you model to your taste, and it doesn't work with human beings that well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, really good. Okay. Let's think about that one as well. Thank you. All right. Cool. So recruiting developers with required skills, how to break free of narrow job descriptions, and how to assess performance. Cool. Alrighty. Okay. So before you go on, think of it first. What would be the kind of common way that maybe a more traditional HR team would approach this topic? Maru's already given us a view on that. So before we kind of think agile, what's kind of more the traditional ways you've seen out there? Definitely the performance and reward. We often just kind of rearrange the process. Maybe change the rating scales, there's nothing kind of different. We're not breaking this down and treating it like a complex problem. So that's a nice example. Or we do things like competency frameworks, these kind of things. So, or a training solution. That's often what you see as well. So let me know what you would tend to commonly see from a more traditional HR team in the reply to your challenge. Yeah, I like your challenge there, Rick, of moving away from it's all about money. Looking at one at the moment on that. Okay. Okay, so the question is, what if we solved it with an agile mindset? So let's kind of go through some of these questions and consider how you might approach the challenge that you're considering. We've just got a few coming through around the more traditional ways. So we've got, so setting up a HR department would be writing out different subjects of HR, such as recruitment, talent management, development, making a plan of how to make it work. Definitely. So we would, we would naturally create the silos of HR topics, and then set up all these projects that we'd be working on, with view of kind of trying to achieve all these big, huge, complex problems all at the same time. Excellent. And we've got another one, which is how to motivate leaders to embrace succession plan as an opportunity. Alrighty, so let's get into it. So we're going to draw on a few design principles or ways of working that come from the agile world, and start to think, okay, if we applied it to our business challenge, what might that look like? Okay, first one, of course, know your customer. So I think this is an interesting starting point for a HR team. Who is the customer in the challenge that you've got here? And also, how do you start to break that customer down into different segments as well? So how do you start to tap into more of that personal experience of what's going on at work? How do we get a sense of the different user needs, the different challenges, the different pain points that people are facing? What are the actual needs of the customer group you're doing this for, as opposed to sort of the assumptions that might sit around this topic that you've got? And how would we actually go and validate and get evidence around that? So a really interesting project that I'm working on at the moment is around evolving performance and reward. And one thing we've done is we've set up some key persona types to be looking at very different experiences that people have as they go to work and what they need from any kind of performance conversation and feedback conversation. So we've got, and there are different levels in the organization, different types of people, different experiences of work. So know your customer, who's your customer, and what is their actual needs for this challenge that you're facing. So first, silent brainstorm for you. For your own business challenge, who do you think the customer is? So yes, it might be employees, but could you go even one step further? Is there a certain segment of the workforce that you're looking at? Or how would you kind of tap more into the needs that are going on? And what is the actual problem you're trying to solve? Or Do you have that data yet? So for your business challenge, who's your customer and what problem are you trying to solve? Yep, leaders are definitely customers. You might even treat them as, depending on the situation, you might actually treat them as a sole customer group. The whole solution might be for leaders as such. Then we also have this dynamic where we talk about leaders in everybody. So then you would need to be clear, what are we going after and why, with something like that, Karim? Yeah, so Maru, you're saying the system is the customer. Yes, though the people in that system, what is their needs? What's the business needs there? What's their, the problems to solve for them, the pains to kind of get over? And how ultimately does this system help them as well as deliver value through to the end customer of the organization, which is what we're also setting up. So that's something to kind of start thinking about in terms of that dynamic.
Just to clarify the semantics of where I'm coming from, the system is the people. So that's what I mean by referring to the system. Right. It's systemic thinking. You can't differentiate by looking at particular pieces of the system by looking at this group or this group, because usually it takes you away from the systemic issue, which you cannot solve by looking at particular groups. Yeah.
So I don't. Yeah, totally. I very much understand where you're coming from with systems thinking in that sense. I think there's also about how do you understand the impact of one particular kind of solution and approach. So we can keep exploring that. And because I also think there's some unpicking, isn't there, of how do you start to change the whole system? You can't fully control all of that, but there's how do you influence parts of it to then start to evolve it and iterate it over time. Cool. All right, so Chris has got customers, all employees, but ones with very different mindset, with very different comfortable ways of working. Problem is to understand these differences first of all. I definitely agree, Chris. So, and this is also where you can get a sense of personalization. So we talk a lot around how do you build kind of HR solutions that give a sense of the personalization of the work experience or the experience of work, as well as that ability to scale. So if I think about someone like Spotify, I saw them do something interesting in this area recently. So they wanted to create more choice in how do you embrace benefits and decide how you would like to maybe take up certain kind of recognition, from everything from pensions through to maybe equity and shares, through to how you kind of get your well-being supported, maybe going to the gym, all of these kind of things. So what they created was actually 5 different types that you could choose to take up at different times in your job. And they reflected different types of stages in your working life and different types of sort of persona groups. And I thought that was really interesting because you can scale that. It's not about tailoring it to everybody, but it's giving people a sense of choice of, okay, I'm going to take more money now because I want more kind of cash because I want to buy my house and, live more in the moment, versus I want to put more money into a pension or different. So it's interesting how some of this kind of breaking down the customer can really be quite intriguing for where you go with some of the solutions. Okay, so recruitment, candidates and team leaders are customers. Cool. And then we've got a question. When setting up a HR department, would you say the CEO and the HR employees are my customers, but are the employees of the company also my customers? Definitely. So I think there's a two-way. I would actually be focusing on what does the HR team need to deliver to the employees and then ultimately through to the business. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so next area is defining value. So this is quite an interesting one as well for when you start to work in the people space. So who's the customer? And then what is the actual value you're wanting to deliver through to the customer? And often I ask HR teams to start thinking about value from different viewpoints, to kind of challenge them to also just move beyond value as measured through the engagement survey, which a lot of you have seen, and I've got it there. But that's often the kind of go-to of how would you measure the impact of anything you do in HR. So we want to kind of think a little bit more around value. What's the tangible value that you might deliver, and what are some of the kind of data points that you would go and gather, maybe more like immediately, but also lag. So a lot of HR solutions, you know, it's about behavioral change over time. As Maru's saying, systems change over time. How would you even try to track that? What would that look like? So a really interesting kind of exercise to do up to start with is, if for a business challenge, what is the value to the business itself and even the business bottom line? Could you ultimately save money, you know, decrease costs? Could there be an increase in productivity, innovation? So what are some of the kind of data points you could be going after there? Also, what is the value through to the end customer? So this is the people that are buying the products, or if it's a not for profit, these are the people that are kind of using the community services. And ultimately, any organization, it's all about delivering that value through to that end customer. And this is something that all HR solutions need to be really mindful of. So how are you enabling people to be great in their job to deliver that value through? Also, anything that you create needs to help get the job done as opposed to hinder it. So if you think of some of the processes out there that maybe are introduced by HR teams, sometimes they can actually, you know, stop people from doing their day job. So how do we go much more into that flow of work? Could a solution that you're doing even flow through and, you know, impact things like Net Promoter Score, these kind of things that you could actually measure at the end customer side? And then value to employees. So this where we often feel a bit more comfortable, but definitely what would you be measuring more immediately through to what would you measure over time? So it's always good to think about that for your business challenge. How would you have proof that you're delivering value? So question to you all is, for the challenge that you've got, how would this actually help deliver value to that end customer? So I know I've used customer 1,000 times, but basically the ones that are that the organization is set up to serve. So this is the people that ultimately buy the products and services, or as I said, it might be the community that you're serving. So how would you know there's been that flow through to that end customer? And is there any metric that you might be able to track? So Alan, it would be quite interesting to hear from yours around, because you've got quite an interesting one that has a good impact on the end customer. And I like, so your problem is how to reach candidates the competition doesn't reach. Nice problem to solve. And definitely, I think you, in the recruitment space, you'll definitely need to think of types of candidates as well, don't you? So it's not just, there's going to, yeah, you might be going after certain types of personas, or, you know, people with kind of certain background or experiences, which will be quite interesting to understand. Why might you not be able to find them? What's going on? What's the challenge there? Cool. So we have, Karim's got people metrics are always tough to track. Definitely. Ultimate growth and engagement. So definitely, Karim, and this is why I asked the question. So, but also, is there, so more and more we've got digital influencing the employee experience, and this is offering opportunities to track, usage of things. So even sometimes just the direct, immediate engagement with something. Are people logging on? Are they using it? Are they opening emails? Through to then the actual behavioral change over time. So more and more, how do we start to kind of tap into different ways of tracking results? Lower attrition rates, higher team feedback. Great. We've got engaged employee experience. Question 12 from Gallup. I think that might be about leaving or something. I don't know what question 12 is. Improved HR service, including being more cost effective. Metric did a management survey to use as a benchmark for future surveys after implementing the Agile model. Yeah. Okay, so we've got a kind of survey of what it was like prior and what it will be like over time. Fabulous. Also be interesting to know, so this Agile transformation, how does that actually deliver value to that end customer? So do you think you're going to, be more innovative? Are we going to see, kind of either a good continued delivery service or even better customer service going through to the end customer? That would be quite interesting as well. Cool. So we've got ability of the service to respond to business opportunities in an agile way and a way that is sustainable, i.e. not requiring out of office hours working as norm. Therefore, the metric we could be looking at is net promoter growth of business opportunities, team feedback on how happy they are feeling. Cool. Yeah. So I like that one. How do we actually track work? How do we do things sustainably? People don't have to work constantly after hours, and that we're actually maintaining delivery rates and team feedback. I like that one. Cool. Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, conscious of time, I'll keep moving. Okay, so number 3, I'm only up to 3 and there's 9, so we'll better keep going. So innovate within constraints. This is a big topic within HR. So often there's a default for the constraints in which we're operating on. But we need to meet this regulatory need. We need to meet the compliance need. We need to therefore capture this data. And while I'm definitely a huge believer of working with regulation and law, what happens sometimes in the HR space is we put that as to how we design the process or the solution. So performance is a really good one. We've often designed performance management processes with the idea that we need to capture certain data, or we need to have a rating in case they're not a low performer, or we need to have some words against their rating. So in case we ever go to tribunal. And actually reality of it is that those things are often not used in those cases at all. And we're also designing things for this lowest common denominator. So let's put that to the side. Let's think about the user experience. How do we build something that enriches the employee experience? And then think, okay, are we meeting these compliance needs? Often we generally actually do, and that's what's really interesting about it. And the next one is this human-centric design. So if anything I'm seeing in the kind of world of Agile coming into HR is the power of kind of design thinking impacting how we're creating solutions. And this is very much tapping into, okay, how do we build empathy for what's going on for the people? How do we understand the challenges that they're facing? And how do we really test solutions very quickly and cheaply and cheerfully before we go anywhere near implementation? So an example would be a company were looking at the management development. So they had thousands of managers, a really big company, and they would often take they would ask their managers to attend a 2-day management development program. So they could only ever have 50 maybe managers at one time go to one of these programs, even less. So they could only ever reach about a few hundred, maybe once a year. And everyone wanted to be developed, but no one really had time to take these 2 days out of the workplace to go and have their 2-day management development training. So they said, well, let's just relook at this. First of all, let's go and understand what's going on for managers in our company. What do they really need to learn? And they discovered that actually managers didn't think about, oh, I need to go and develop my feedback competencies, they would talk about problems that they faced at the time that it was going on. So I've got a really difficult conversation tomorrow. I don't really know how to do it. I would really like to learn or practice. Or I've got to go and hire someone for my team now, and I don't know how to do that very well. I would like to learn how to do that. So they would have these problems at different times that they would need to solve. So they started to look at, okay, could we try and get some learning to be available at the time that the manager has these problems? And so with the feedback one, they were even looking at, could they connect kind of messages to maybe something that comes out to managers from the HR system that says, oh, okay, you've got to go and have your performance conversation. Do you need some learning on how to do that? And yes, please. And so they would have digital resources. They would maybe have a coach to go and talk to. Maybe they could attend a short 90-minute workshop. So they started to prototype and test all these mini solutions to actually start solving managers' problems at the time and making them available when managers needed them. And so they started to build this whole new kind of ecosystem of learning. And they just had they were able to touch all managers at the same time, which was really interesting. They had a huge amount of engagement with it compared to what they did previously, and they actually saw managers changing behavior as a result. So this was a really interesting way where these very small prototype, what is the problem going on for this person? How do I speak more their language? And how do I test something very small scale and then start to build it out? They actually stopped all face-to-face programs in this organization at that time, because they just said, this is not delivering value. We need to reinvent this. So it was really interesting kind of case study. And that, of course, takes us to being evidence-based. So how do we be much more data-driven and really kind of testing hypothesis when it comes to HR? And for lots of the agile people online, we often talk about the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. In the world of HR, they sometimes give you the solution before you've even kind of investigated. So they turn up and they say, oh, we've got a problem with talent, or that manager can't manage their team. They need some training, or these people don't suit that, you need to, redesign that area of the business. And often the solution is kind of presented with the problem. So this is, how do we start testing some of those assumptions? How could we go and get some data and bring it back before we go and work on that whole kind of project or solution in one go? And this is, how do we get a bit more savvy with how we actually use our data? So next question to you. With your business challenge, you most likely have a hypothesis going at the moment of what you could do to fix it. So let me know what that might be. And is there any way that you could try and test it in a very small scale in an experiment or a prototype first? So what's your hypothesis on how you could solve your challenge? And is there any way that you reckon you could actually test that? Cool. So Johannes, my challenge to you is, so you've said the word pilot, and I always like to challenge the word pilot, because can you fail? That is my question. So when we do an experiment, there is an ability that it won't work, or a chance that it won't work. And the reason I call this out is that for me, for years working in HR, often I would set up pilots of, say, a leadership development program is a good example. We'd always do these pilots. But by the time I'd done the pilot, I'd often signed the vendor, the contract. I had the CEO in the room, and we were running the first big program. And if things failed, I was just going to tweak it, and kind of slightly change it. I was still going to deliver it out. It wasn't really going to stop there. So an experiment is, can you actually stop it if would you stop it there? How could you actually test what worked and what hasn't, and then use that data to move to the next stage? And so in HR, sometimes the experiments could be as basic as this. So a team I know was working on career development, and one of their solutions that they thought about was linked to how do we build more opportunities internally. And so the main idea was introducing some tech to help people find opportunities internally, find new projects, find people to work with, new experiences, kind of like an internal LinkedIn. But they went, oh, you know what? We need to test this before we go anywhere near even thinking about the tech solution. So what they did is they actually created cardboard cutouts of what the tech solution could look like. And they went and sat in front of employees and got employees to say, okay, you've now got this screen in front of you. What would you do? And actually tested whether the employees would want to engage with that solution and whether it actually would feel to them like they were solving a problem for them. And only once they got so much kind of evidence that this was the right direction, did they then go and do an actual kind of experiment with the basic tech. So it's just something to think about. So yeah, not stopping, maybe adjust. Exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it, to think about. So definitely a pilot in a country, you're not necessarily going to stop that. But what would be the point where you're calling, okay, we've run it for so long. What's the data that we've got at this point? Have we actually got proof that our hypothesis is working and now we can keep moving? Or if we don't, what would need to happen still before we can be confident we can keep going forward? Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we've got, first of all, we validate our solution and involve them in decision making. And after that, we test in small sub-department, and then their feedback shows us the right direction. Cool. Yep. Anything else you can do with, I always like more data points. So feedback's a really good one, but is there anything else that you might be able to test to have evidence that this is successful? Alrighty, if anyone's else got some hypotheses, any ways to test it, please let me know. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving because we've got not that much time left. Okay, so then 6 is fight the process waste. So for a lot of you, I'm sure you've experienced HR processes that feel like they're added on to your everyday. So, there's this extra task I've now got to go and do. And sometimes there's things where we take people out of the flow of work to kind of get things done. Performance is the great example of this. Often performance management has been this sort of formal conversation separate to work where we go and fill in a form and we maybe put a rating on there and these kind of things. And it's often people feel like they don't have time, or they may be repeating conversations that they're having throughout, each month. So how do we create solutions that are much more in the flow of work and actually enable the work to get done or touch into that, as opposed to this kind of adding on to what people are doing? So that's a really kind of good challenge to give yourself as you start to build solutions. And then, of course, definitely one size doesn't fit all. And this is why I asked that know your customer at the start. So how do you really start to tap into the different types of people you have, the human experience, and the key needs that they have? Because if you create a solution, yes, you can't tailor it to every person in the organization, but if you know you're confidently meeting a range of needs across different types of persona groups, you can be really confident that as a whole, you're enriching the overall experience. And actually, you're going to make life better for people, and you're going to help them get the job done. And that's what this is all about. So really kind of good thing to think about. Also, there's always this debate of kind of personalization versus scale, the ability to scale. And that's why I kind of talked about that Spotify model one at the earlier. So you can create solutions that you can scale that also helps give people choice going forward. And then, of course, incremental. So how do you start to deliver value slice by slice, piece by piece? How do you test and then start to build out in how you're approaching the people practice or solution? And also, how do you know you've delivered enough? So what's really interesting is if you think about a kind of definition of done or a kind of ultimate outcome, a lot of things, if it is linked to engagement, how do you know you've done enough? How do you know it's okay to now move on to the next problem to solve? Or do you forever work on that solution? So when all our metrics are connected to employee satisfaction or this sense of personal growth, it can be very hard to know when you're done and when you should now actually use, the people you've got to now focus on the next big problem for the business. So actually, how do we get quite tangible with having results of what we're delivering and value against that? And then ultimately, radical business collaboration. So for me, this is where we need to go. I don't think we should, I'd be very happy if we're not calling it HR in the future. There's lots of new names coming out. That's great. I just want to always have evidence that people are working differently before they change their name, because that's the worst part, is people call themselves something new, like people and culture, and they're still very traditional HR. So that's actually can be quite a challenge. But this is about, if you start to use a lot of the techniques we've talked about today, you would either have business people in the team with you solving the problems. We would be kind of trying to build sort of this T-shaped teams and T-shaped people through the organization. We would be using transparent, visualizing ways of working, which already, if you bring transparency into the world of HR, it really starts to change things. Transparency of work that's going on, transparency of solutions. If you're properly user testing, you are testing directly with the business before you release. And that just means you're co-creating in a whole new way. So much of this is a different type of collaboration, different type of working with the business. And then ultimately, for me, it's about, if you think of your employee experience much more like that customer journey, with moments that matter. So if we get these moments that matter right, we can really engage our people. We can get them to give the best that they can give. So key moment that matters is onboarding. We all know that. If you get onboarding right, when someone starts a new job, you've really got the best of them and they will give so much. You get it wrong, you might lose them really quickly, or they become very disengaged, and they might actually say, terrible things about your organization. So it's a good example of this moment that matters. So how do we build it like this journey, and how do we go after these moments that matters? And that's ultimately having a portfolio of products and services and see it much more as that holistic delivery out across the organization. And this is very much about what we're trying to do with our end customer. How do we deliver that fantastic experience through to them through our products and services? And how do we, of course, now do that internally with our people? So, final question, but you can also put questions in. How could you use a test or prototype before releasing the solution? Oh, maybe that's too big to think about right at the end. For your business challenge within your organization. So, we talked about experimenting and prototyping before. How could you actually have a user test? So who in the business could you involve as the user test? And I think I sort of got some similar answers to this before, didn't I? Cool. So we got one here of the HR services for managers' problems. Ask managers about their problems and have an experiment with a service to target the most frequent one and check how it is used. Great example, Laszlo. So, and this is the thing, if we start, because some of the HR kind of challenges are really, really big, but if you start to break them down and actually focus on one component first, and then find out what works, you can then quite rapidly build a solution for the whole organization. Okay, so we've got single teams who volunteered to road test things, definitely. And Andy Dyke, how can you user test an organizational design? Well, you could even do it sort of depends on what's happening, but I've even done it on kind of so tried to bring forth the concept of the new design using Lego, using there was one where we did a kind of just a very 1 week design sprint at a big organization about an organizational design project. And at the end, the team decided that they were going to role play, so like a little play, the solution to the actual executive board. So they actually acted it out and got people and sort of taught, presented different personas, what was going to happen to them, what was going to be their experience, where would they be working now and why, and got them to give feedback. So you could even start with that basic type of prototype. But definitely I would be thinking about an organizational design if there's possibilities of just focusing on one part first, and see how that runs as an experiment and a test, and then build it out elsewhere, then that's always a good approach as well. Cool. Have people that are ready to experiment the change and let them try things out. So I'm conscious it's time. So I am saying thank you to you all. If you've got any questions, you can still ask me, I'll stay on. But thank you very much for your time and all your chat in the chat box.
Thank you so much, Natal. That was wonderful. We hear so much about the sort of changing, reinventing HR to enable agility, but we hear so little about actually taking an agile approach to doing that. And I love that. One thing stuck with me, or lots of things stuck with me, but using design thinking techniques to road test we literally teach teams how to test their business ideas with customers, and why can't we do the same? That's brilliant. I love that.
Definitely. It's one of the easiest places to start with a bit of Agile HR is just do some design thinking and get a bunch of people in the room and test it with them. It works a treat.
Well, it's internal customers as well. It's so it's
totally.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was great. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. It's a perspective I've never really heard from HR. So I do appreciate you giving up your evening to come and speak to us. And thank you everybody for coming along. I hope you got some value from that. I know you got some value from that. So if you send your questions in, if you still have them. I'm not going to keep you any longer, given that it is 7:32, and as a former Scrum Master, I should not be busting my time box. However,
yes.
We're taking a break in August. We tend to do that. We are lining up a special guest in September who will hopefully be coming to speak to us about their upcoming book. That's going to be exciting. So look out for that announcement. I'm just trying to pin him down for a date. He's always good fun. So be ready for that. Otherwise, thank you so much. Good luck. Enjoy your summer, everybody. I hope you get to get away a little bit. And once again, thank you, Natal. That was great. We really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you all. Have
See you in
good.
September, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.